I would like to turn around the title and speak about the education of future. To be more precise, education of futures. In that respect, I am trying to focus not necessarily the whole spectrum, but to address, first of all, the education for the leadership level. And I would like to do that through applying market trends terminology. So I'm referring to bubbles, not necessarily in the narrow sense of financing. The interesting aspect is to look well beyond the midterm horizon. So I would like to cover probably a period up to 2050, the next 35 years. Why? Because those who will be in their early 40s at that time should enter the training in leadership now with the primary school starting for them. The three bubbles are, number one, a competitive security bubble. Number two, what I call a sustainability bubble. And number three is the potential growth bubble. Starting a bit with the first one, let me first of all point out that these three bubbles are interconnected. But what might be interesting to see whether they fold out or they are being unfolded in certain periods of time, like security bubble, for example, short to mid-term, sustainability bubble, mid-term to long-term, and the growth bubble up to 2050. So if I could have the next slide. The next slide is showing on the left-hand side three booms and busts of competitive security. The First and the Second World War and the 1950s until the Cuban Missile Crisis and the mid-1970s, 1980s. What was defining, especially for the last two busts, fortunately, we managed to prevent the tragedy of the first half of the century, 20th century. And what was defining the combination of luck and leadership, but leadership at the highest level was required to really go through, like in October 1962, difficult moments, President Kennedy, and there was, by the end of the crisis, an understanding about the severity of the crisis. So if I could have the next slide, the issue is for us whether there is a bubble, similar bubble in front of us. Do we have the security boom and bust crisis coming back again? And if we will be able to see the next slide, then there is a reference to a potential boom and bust cycle somewhere 2025. And the important leadership requirement here is to have less luck and more leadership in this mix of how to manage such a crisis. It's like if you put someone in the driving seat where hundreds of millions are sitting behind the driver, you need more than, for example, a taxi driver in London is getting as a 3 years training. And there are certain peculiarities of these crises. Leaders had to learn in a very severe way, like in 2 weeks in October, how not to move off the cliff. The next slide, if I might be able to move to that, is of course related to the bubble, which I call sustainability bubble. And here, what is relevant, of course, the cluster of crises which is unfolding as we speak now, practically becoming a spaghetti, which is difficult to untangle. But what is even more important, that this crisis or cluster of crises are raising again serious leadership issues. Leadership issues at the level of states and state entities, leadership issues at the level of intergovernmental organizations, and there are a couple of them which are to handle, and at the level of people as well. The futures in front of us can be quite complex, dependent upon the amount of doom and gloom we might foresee. But what would be important to really identify what kind of resources could be lined up to manage the crisis in a better way than it was the situation, be it in 2008 or going back to 1929-33 period. And here, of course, there are many important details I cannot go into now about how to internalize negative externalities and how to multiply the positive externalities. In general, how to put on a market-based foundation this management strategy. But again, I would like to boil down the management of a potential sustainability bubble to the leadership issue. The leadership at the level of economic leaders and the highest level of leaders, intergovernmental organizations leaders, and of course future leaders from the level of the citizens. And again, what would be required, not just the classical educational training, but something which is again focusing on these highest strata levels and combining deep immersion and as close to reality type of situations as it is possible. If we move on to the last bubble, the growth bubble, here I would like first to share with you, if we can bring it up, Economist Intelligence Unit recent projection, where in 2050 China will become a 100 trillion economy, a 10 times increase in 35 years now on, representing 1/3 more of GDP than the US. And India practically catching up the United States, and Indonesia becoming as big as the US GDP is representing right now. So there are serious rearrangements in the global economic field, which would require, of course, rearrangements on the national level as well. And the question is, how far through education and through leadership education, we will manage this absolutely high speed travel in the future. What is more complex, and if I go to the next slide, is the increase in the labor force. And if you have a look at the bottom of the countries which have the highest increase in the labor force, we are speaking about some of the countries like Nigeria and Pakistan and Kenya and Egypt and Iran, and some countries from the Middle East, Libya, for example, where these are the countries affected already by severe pains in the socio-economic field. And if I move to the next slide, then we will see that in the same period of time, there is a decline, especially in the Middle East, Africa region, but all over the world, of the growth rates. So there will be a need for leaders to manage a situation where in certain parts of the world there is an explosion of the workforce and the labor, and already the labor market is extremely complex. And at the same time, there is a transition, which is probably a transition of a century or 150 years, which will have to be managed. And again, this is requiring some leadership education at the highest level about how not to manage a bubble when the bubble is getting inflated. So these are the three aspects. All of them are, of course, reminding us of lessons of the past. All of them are requiring leadership at different levels, but what I would like to see, number one, education is focusing on futures scenarios, and education is focusing on how to manage future boom and bust cycles without the bubble bursting. So thank you so much.